Hello and welcome to the Real Hernando podcast. This podcast is created to highlight our amazing local community and small businesses right here in Hernando. I am your host, Derek, and this episode is brought to you by Shelby Row Productions. This is a very special edition because today I'm joined with Mayor Chip Johnson.
Good to see you, Derek.
Good to see you. So moving forward, can I just call you Chip?
That's what everybody calls
That's what I'm talking about. So yeah, man, I'm so grateful and thankful and honored to be here and for you to give this time for me. This is really great. I started this podcast as a way to promote the community, not specifically, but the main genesis of it was for small businesses. But as it's grown, I'm wanting to break into more community too, sure. Organizations, nonprofits. So I think the mayor, is a pretty integral part of a community, right?
I would hope so. And being mayor is very interesting, and the reality of it is the majority of the people, a small majority, chose me just to kind of manage the business of the town. So It's not as glamorous as it looks.
Well, for me, it's really neat. So this is exciting. And your name kept popping up with other owners that I was interviewing for this podcast. You should talk to Chip. I'm like, well, introduce me.
Well, I'm glad we met.
So we got connected and we met a couple weeks ago for coffee at Coffee Central. Shout out to Tina Tatum.
That place is awesome.
It's great. And here we are in your office, and very generous for you to spend your time here today. So I appreciate it.
I'm happy to do it.
So we're here to talk about Chip, and share your story, because even though you're a well-known person, there's probably parts of your story that not a lot of people know about.
You're probably right.
And that's what this is all about. So let's and we'll just kind of go through the timeline. So let's start with your upbringing. Where you're from. I read that you had a really close-knit family. What was your upbringing in childhood like? And where was it?
Well, I'm not from Hernando.
Okay.
I think a lot of people know that, but a lot of people may not. But I'm very typical my story is very typical of people who've ended up in Hernando. So I was born in Memphis, and we were in Memphis, and my mother had moved us to a great school district. And literally the year I was supposed to start first grade is when they started busing. And suddenly I was going to be bused all the way across, 45 minutes away or something. And it wasn't what my mom wanted. She wanted me in that school district she had been in. So they scrambled, her and my dad did, and got me into a private school. Private schools are expensive. So after about 2.5 years of that, she looked across the state line and said, hey, in Southaven, there's great public schools. So we did what many, many people have done over the years in the early 70s and moved across the state line to Southaven and went to the great public schools. And I was raised in Southaven there and graduated from Southaven High School. And that's how I ended up through my early education. So I went to Greenbrook Elementary and Southaven High School. And there are a whole lot of people living in Hernando who did the exact same thing.
Right here, man.
Yeah.
My daughter's going to have that story.
Right.
So we lived in Hernando because of the school.
Yeah, and I think that story is the story of why the education, the start of it, why the education in DeSoto County as a whole is so good. Because when people literally move to put their kids in a better school situation, they put pressure on the system all the time to become better and better and better. And I remember for years, every few years, the citizens would literally vote to raise their own taxes to fund a school bond issue to build more schools. So since the early 70s, when my mother moved me here, DeSoto County has really been drawing people and been founded on great public education.
That's what's helped it blossom.
It really has. I talk to my fellow mayors sometimes and I say, we all like to say the great things we're doing in our cities, but the reality is if we had terrible public schools, none of these things would be happening.
Yeah.
Nobody with children is going to move to a place with bad public schools.
No.
So, that's the bedrock of everything is our public education here.
So what was it like growing up in Southaven?
It was a different time for sure. Southaven.
I'm sure it looked a little different.
Right there on State Line Road, there was at one of the main intersections, there was a orange 55-gallon drum out in the middle with 4 stop signs on it.
Wow.
You know,
was
so
it State Line in 51 or?
it was where the old Walmart was. So, you know, there's always a lot of traffic going. No, Kmart. There was a Kmart.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was just right there off of the interstate.
Kmart.
Yes, there was a Kmart there. There was a McDonald's. There was a Shakey's Pizza. So it was a great place to grow up as a kid. You know, we rode our bikes everywhere.
Yeah.
So I lived in Greenbrook, and way on the far side was Colonial Hills subdivision where I had friends. And we'd get on our bikes early in the morning and just take off and be gone all day on our bicycles, and nobody worried about us. And if they'd have known what we were doing, they might have worried about us.
You know, I was the same, only in the 80s, you know, and times had changed, haven't it? Like, I used to just disappear, and I'd be 10 miles across town with my other buddies, and we were like 12 years old.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine letting my 13-year-old do that.
If Mom knew we were at the levee, jumping our bikes off into the lake and holding on for dear life and swimming back to shore with them, she probably wouldn't have liked that part of it.
I know. And she used to get so mad if I didn't come in and check in. Now I get why.
Yeah.
Before it used to be so annoying, right?
And, you know, growing up in Southaven back then and anywhere in DeSoto County, everybody had to go to Memphis to do their shopping, really.
Yeah.
You know, that's where everything was. The Southland Mall and all that was Sears. And my mother worked at Sears. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we were in Sears all the time.
Yeah, it's funny to see Sears still out there. I remember the Sears Roebuck catalog.
Oh, yeah.
I actually bought a guitar. This isn't about me, but I started playing guitar when I was 13. My first guitar was bought through the Roebuck catalog.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had that Sears wish book that came out around Christmas time, and we had written page numbers all on the front of it so Mom would know what we wanted.
Yeah.
And luckily, she got that employee discount, so that's how everything we got came from Sears.
Now we're talking about
I had those tough skin jeans and looked good in them.
Had the most amazing washer and dryer, dishwasher, right? They had all the best appliances. So through school, you know, were you part of any activities like sports or even looking back that far, were you interested in public speaking or any kind of...
Oh, I wasn't interested in public speaking. Yeah. No, I was kind of a shy guy. But I do remember the way I got into sports is my babysitter, I had a son my age, and she wanted to sign her son up for soccer. She had come over from California, and there was no soccer. And so she started soccer. And so, of course, they invited me, and Mom said, "Do you want to play soccer?" And I said, "Yeah, but I don't know what it is." And so that was in maybe 4th or 5th grade.
Okay.
And so I played on the first soccer team in DeSoto County. And it worked for me because I was a little guy. You know, the great thing about soccer is people of any size can play it.
As long as you're fast, right?
I was fast. So I did really, I mean, when I graduated high school, I was this tall and 135 pounds. So, you know, I did 8th grade football for a little while, but by 9th grade, those guys were way bigger than me, and I could outrun them mostly, but when they caught me, it was terrible.
Yeah.
So I decided soccer was my sport.
You were easily pushed down, right?
Right.
They just wrapped around you. But yeah, that speed, though, is perfect for soccer. Did you do track?
I ran YMCA track for a couple of seasons, and I was practicing with the track team in high school, but I don't think I ran with them. I don't think I participated in the competitions. I did play tennis for a season, and the main reason was it got you out of class when there were games. So I remember coming down to Hernando to play tennis matches against Hernando High School. I was second string tennis. I wasn't very good, but it got me out of class.
Second string. You're on the sideline.
That's right.
On a tennis match. That's funny. So you go through high school? And
I did. I was a little different than some students. I took on our campus, we had the VOTEC for the entire DeSoto County.
Okay.
So people from Olive Branch and Horn Lake and Hernando would be bused to the Southaven campus, but I was already there. And I was raised to be a mechanical guy. You know, my dad was a car guy. And so we were all raised knowing how to use tools. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to take metal trades as an addition to my general curriculum. So I would do all the math and English classes and everything, but then there was a 2.5-hour period during the day where I was in VOTEC doing metal trades. So it was sheet metal, welding, and machine shop. And Mr. Jefferson, our teacher at the time, he was a Navy veteran. That plays into part of the rest of my story later. But he found out that I knew math. I was pretty good at math. And so he said, "You're going to be our guy who competes in machine shop because you have to be fairly good at converting decimals and fractions back and forth." And so I became the machine shop guy.
And there's competitions within that.
Yeah, you would join the VICA club. I was the vice president of VICA. That was the only political thing I did in high school, the Vocational Industrial Clubs of America. And so we would go off to community colleges where they had the same programs, and we would compete against each other. They'd give us a set of drawings and say, make this part.
Wow.
And so that was fun to do. I was 1 year before they came in with a computerized milling machine. So everything we did was manual. We had a brand new CNC machine sitting there the last 2 months of my senior year, but we couldn't use it. They were waiting on the next class to learn how to use that. So
pretty cool though that you learned the manual way. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it was. And the crazy thing is, I haven't welded or touched a machine tool since I left. When I went in the Navy, I kind of got tricked. I thought that's what I was signing up to do, but I became a mechanic instead. So
let's bridge into that. You graduate high school. What was your main driver going into the military?
I accidentally scored pretty high on this test called the PSAT. Back then you didn't prep for tests. There were no classes. They just said, hey, here's the day you're taking the test. Mm-hmm. And so I took the PSAT, which I guess all the military looks at, and they all started calling me. And so I went to, I actually went to the Navy recruiter's office, and somehow they just talked me into joining right then.
They're pretty good at that, aren't they?
Yeah, so this was in November of my senior year.
What year is this now?
83.
83?
Yeah,
okay.
So I was in November of my senior year, and my mother and dad had to sign for me because I was just 17 at the time, but I entered on the delayed entry program. And I was going to have to wait till I was 18, so I signed up in November and pledged that I was going in, and I didn't go in until the following September after I turned 18 in August.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, that's how I got. But the interesting thing was, so I signed up to be a machinist mate. Well, you would think that's a machinist that runs machines. A machinist mate in the Navy is flat out mechanic.
Okay.
I never saw a lathe, never touched a lathe, so that my days of machine shop were over.
And you had to learn from scratch?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it was interesting. They sent me to this school where they literally were teaching people, this is a hammer and this is a combination end wrench. And it's like, these people really not know what these are? Because my father taught me all that. We knew everything about tools. That's, we tore cars apart, and I had a 54 Chevy pickup I tore apart, and I had a little MGB that I worked on and drove back and forth to school. So we were always working on our own stuff. I actually did an engine swap on a Maverick Grabber. That we just did those things. That's just what we did.
So it wasn't totally foreign for you.
No, not at all.
You knew what a hammer was.
That's right.
You were pretty good, but it wasn't totally cold. Like you had the experience working on it.
And it actually turned out well for me.
So I would gather you still enjoyed that, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I've got a couple old trucks right now. I wish I had more time to tinker with. I want to get them running and on the road. But my Navy time was very interesting. I set out to Great Lakes, Illinois for boot camp. I remember the whole family just crying like I was going off to war or something. Everybody came from a pretty emotional family, and so they all told me bye, and I went down to the station there where they were going to send me away with some other guys. Actually, one of my high school classmates went with me. We literally got on the same flight and went to the same boot camp. And we got there, and we went through the whole day, and they were like, well, you're going to stay at the Admiral Bimbo Hotel in downtown Memphis. And I'm like, you mean we're still in town? So I didn't even tell my mom and dad I was still there because I didn't want to go through all that crying again. So
as far as they knew, you were off.
I was just gone. So we got on the plane and we went to boot camp the next day and rolled in there on September 6th and did 60 days of boot camp. And then I went off to a little A school and went to Orlando to school and then went to submarine school. And so, there was a time where they said, do you want to volunteer for submarines? And I said, well, sounds interesting. Let's do it.
Right, because that's where I want to jump to. As I saw on your website, you were on a fast attack submarine patrolling the northern Pacific Ocean in support of the Cold War effort.
Yes.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. So
it was.
I'm a total novice when it comes to anything military. So what does that entail, and how did you end up in that position?
It's so when I volunteered for submarine duty, they sent me to the basic submarine training school in Groton, Connecticut. And you go through these trainers where they put you in a room and all the pipes start bursting with water and you're having to fix the pipes before it fills up and you drown. I mean, they're not going to let you drown, but you do all those things.
An important skill to have.
Yes. Yeah. You got to know how to fix leaks. And so I went through that, but then I went to a submarine mechanics school. And that was in Hawaii on Ford Island, which is out in the middle of Pearl Harbor. And at the time, there was no bridge, so you had to take a ferry to it. So there I met one of my best friends in the world, who is still one of my best friends in the world. I'm going to see him in a couple of weeks, named David Bundy. And we found out we were going to the same boat. We already had our orders to the USS Permit. So we became really fast friends in that 2 months period over there. And we played a lot of tennis because we'd go to the guys teaching the school. This was kind of like their easy duty. So they wanted to get off at 2 every day, which meant we got out of school at 2 almost every day. So we could catch the ferry and go to Honolulu and lay on the beach and played a lot of tennis. So it was really a fun couple of months. And we got back and we took a little vacation back home for a week or two. Then we had to meet back in San Diego where the boat was. And I remember I was driving down the road on the base. I was kind of new and lost, and I saw this guy walking, and it was my friend Dave. Back then there were no cell phones, so I had no way to reach him. I couldn't call him, and I just saw him. He was walking. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I bought a new car, and I was walking down here to the bus stop so I could go pick up my new car." So that's how Dave and I reconnected. And the boat was actually out at sea. So there was no boat to report to. There was one of the chiefs there with a few of the crewmen that were left behind, and we reported into him, and he said, "Just check in with me every day or two till the boat comes back." So on the day the boat came back, all my stuff, my furniture and stuff was being moved and dropped at my house. And so I had special permission to get that done and get it moved into my apartment. And my friend Dave went to the boat, and when he came back, I was excited. I'm like, "Tell me about it, what's this like?" And he and I had been going to the beach all the time, it was San Diego. And we were, swimming and trying to boogie board and trying to learn to surf and whatever, but we were really tan from all this. And he just looked at me and he said, "Everybody's so pale." And I said, "Uh-oh, this may not be what we thought it was."
No more vitamin D for you.
Yeah, because
right?
they had just come back from a 6-month cruise. So, and we found out that we were on that boat, we were deployed a lot. I think our first year we were deployed 92% of the year.
Living in the submarine.
Yeah, just gone. You'd pull into ports here and there, but you're not at your base. You're gone.
Wow.
So that was interesting. And, the typical, they call these things WESTPACs. It stands for Western Pacific Deployment. So you take off and you generally drive your boat and you don't take the whole crew. You got about 130 on the crew, about 110 people on the boat. What's what'll fit. And you leave some behind going to school and all that. So you drive over to Hawaii and you fix whatever broke on the way. And then you might drive to Guam. And the whole time you're doing drills. You're preparing for flooding. You don't really get to sleep good because every time you go to sleep, an alarm sounds and you're doing drills and putting on masks and pretending like the boat's on fire or flooding or whatever. Or that you've seen an enemy ship and you're loading the torpedo tubes. So you're just practicing the whole way.
Constantly on high alert.
Yeah, because that's your whole goal is to be ready and well trained if something does happen. And it's a noisy thing when you're running these drills. So you do all that and prepare yourself, and then you get to Guam and you have a little couple weeks there that you kind of play and work. You're fixing the boat again. Things are always breaking. That boat was built in 1962. And when I was on it, it was the oldest nuclear-powered boat left in the Navy. So, and being the mechanics, we had a lot of stuff to fix all the time.
Staying busy.
Yeah, and the really, I don't know, it wasn't real scary, but it left you with an odd feeling is the boat that was produced at the same time as ours was the Thresher. So the Thresher and the Permit were sister boats. The Thresher sank, and all lives were lost. And, and so we even had a couple of parts on our boat that said USS Thresher because, in the shipyard things happen like that. And, of course, everybody died on that boat, and it changed the whole way submarines were built and how parts were replaced. They came up with this new system called SubSafe, which basically means any part on the boat that could make the boat sink if it failed had to be traced from the time the metal came out of the ground. Paperwork, quality control procedures to install it, the whole deal, signatures everywhere. And so later on, I became a quality control inspector and manager. So I was writing all these work procedures and inspecting parts as they went in and all that.
That's some pressure, isn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Because if something happens, it went through you.
Well, really and truly, on a submarine, everybody could potentially sink the boat at any moment. So everybody has to understand what's going on in all systems. we had this qual card. That's what we called it. It was a qual card. It was a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper printed on both sides with tiny little lines. And each line was a whole system you had to learn to qualify as a submariner. So you see the little submarine dolphins that submariners wear on their chest, those are earned with that qual card. And it takes anywhere from 6 months to a year to do that process, because every system, you have to learn everything in that system. You know, I had to learn the sonar system, and I was a mechanic, but I had to know the basics and more than the basics of all that. And then you get somebody in sonar to give you a whole test on it, and you sign off. So, you know, you've got like 50 of these things to do, of whole systems. And then you, at the end, you have a big test with the officers and your engineering officer, and they grill you, and you know, and you finally get it. And it's a really big deal when you qualify submarines. It's like you're now one of them. And we used to have this thing that's illegal now, I think, but they would tack on your dolphins. So literally, they would just take turns punching you in the dolphins. And eventually, the little pins would rub through, and you'd end up with these 2 holes in your chest bleeding. And, you know, but it was pretty, that's just what we did back in the day.
It's a brotherhood, right?
Yeah, it was.
It's like a fraternity inside.
I don't think they do that anymore, but it was kind of, you know, it hurt at the end of the day, but it was just part of the deal.
I would gather, being in such a confined space, under all that pressure, constant testing and drilling, there must be some kind of brotherhood, because you really have to have each other's back, right?
Yeah,
You know,
for sure.
What was that like? What was that?
Well, you know, it lasts forever.
Like?
It's kind of like being in a really, really souped up fraternity.
Yeah.
You know, because we're at that age when most people are in college and forming those bonds. And you form those bonds when you're younger. The older you get, the harder it is to form new bonds.
Agreed.
I found that out. But you're open and trusting, and when you're going through those kind of things with people your age, at that point, they become your brothers forever. So there are 6 of those guys, and I've been gone since 1990. So 32 years ago is the last time I was working with them. But there are 6 of them I stay in really, really close contact with. 2 of them were here about 7 weeks ago when I got married, and I'm going to see 2 or 3 of them at the end of May for a weekend trip to a lake, and we just stay in really close touch. We're best friends because we went through all that together.
That's special. I made some amazing friends in college too, but you know, sometimes lives move on.
They do,
you know?
yeah.
And it's a bummer sometimes when I think of, man, I should have kept in touch with this person or that person. But
I kind of got myself sidetracked there for a minute. I was telling you kind of what we do when we go to sea. Yeah, and so I think the last thing I said was we go to Guam, and you know, we're on the boat and we're fixing the old boat, and then we go have some more drills, and we stop in Japan, and we would stop in Yokosuka, Japan. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but there was a shipyard there, and that's where you do your final fix. And I remember, and this is kind of where I really grew and was able to grow into being the LPO, which is the leading petty officer of my mechanics division. Basically, we were in charge of everything on the boat, mechanical, that was not nuclear. So all the non-nuclear stuff, high pressure air, high pressure hydraulics, all the masts and antennas that went up and down, kitchen equipment, all that stuff was ours. The diesel engine, refrigeration equipment, all that. And so I remember we had 42 or 43 major items on the work log. We call it the ESL, the equipment service log. You know, and the captain looked at it because he wanted to know what was broke on the boat. And we got there, and our current LPO got sick the first day. And so the chief said, hey, Johnson, I want you to kind of run this refit we're doing before we head over to Russia, basically. And so I jumped in, and I had to work with the Japanese who, they would have one guy with a different colored hat on in their crew who kind of spoke a little English. And I didn't speak any Japanese. So we were really working with these shipyard guys who were very skilled. You know, our boat was so old, there were some parts you just couldn't get. And literally, they would just make a new valve. I mean, so they were machinists. They were incredible. And so there were things we fixed internally, but there were things they fixed that we oversaw. And I got us through that, which was a big deal, and ended up getting a letter of commendation. And then I ended up making rank and ended up being the leading petty officer for our division in the last year and a half I was there, which was a lot of responsibility, but yet it was, you know, it was really interesting too. And I learned a lot about leadership, and because, you know, some of my best friends, we were all E5s together, and then suddenly I'm kind of their boss. And, that was very interesting. We'd go out together at night, and then in the morning I was their boss. And
Changes the dynamic a bit.
It changed it a little, but we didn't let it change too much because we really formed a team that just worked as a team. I just happened to be the guy in charge. It's kind of the way we worked it.
Yeah.
I'm just the guy who's supposed to kind of set the schedule and say who does what. And we didn't have many run-ins on that front. We just stayed friends, and we worked together as friends. And we covered for each other, and, that's just what you do. And so then we would leave, when we left Yokosuka, then we would head up basically, this was still the Cold War. And we were basically running spy missions in the waters off of Russia.
Wow.
And so, we would carry these guys with us, and they were crypto techs, and I think we called them spooks. They could speak Russian, and we were basically a platform for them. They would tell our captain where to go. And we were lots of places we probably weren't supposed to be. And we were gathering intelligence data that was going back, and hopefully it was helping to end the Cold War, because the Cold War ended right there at the time we were there.
That's fascinating. Wow.
Yeah, and we were part of the disarmament too. When Reagan worked with the Soviet Union on the disarmament stuff to get rid of nukes, and I think we were one, if not the first, maybe one of the first, certainly, boats to get rid of our nuclear weapon. And, we were the oldest boat. It made sense to get rid of ours. We had a Subrock. And so getting rid of that we thought it was great, because we didn't have to guard that weapon anymore. It took a whole lot of people to deal with a nuclear weapon. So we no longer had that nuclear weapon, which was basically a suicide mission if we fired it anyway,
Yeah. That's some serious kinds of pressure. I can't
But when you're that young, you don't catch it really.
You don't want to know what I was doing when I was 19, right? A little different than that. So
we did some of those things too, probably.
So thankfully, nothing sank, and that you can be here today. So we all appreciate that.
Yeah.
So things wrap up in the military. You were there a total of 4 years, correct?
6 years.
6 years.
Yeah, 84 to 90. Yeah.
You end that period of your life, that phase of your life. And I'd love to talk about what you did next, which we skipped the timeline in a little bit, but you worked for a restoration franchise when you were younger.
I did. Mm-hmm.
And then you came out of the military and purchased said franchise, correct?
Yeah, that was interesting.
So what's that story?
When I was in high school, I'd never had a real job. I had a pickup truck, and so I mowed grass. I washed windows for my mom's friends. I hauled stuff for people. I just did odd jobs because I
hustled.
I was hustling. And so I finally got a real job, and I was telemarketing for this company in Memphis named Rainbow International Restoration and Cleaning Company. Mm-hmm. And then they said, well, our parents own the one in DeSoto County. Would you go work for them? And I said, yeah, that'll be a lot closer. So I was literally in these people's house. Their name was Jack and Allie Hardy. And they ran the business. She did the telemarketing. That's when you would call and say, hey, I'm Chip with Rainbow International. We're giving free estimates to everyone on your street. What room's got to estimate for you tonight, And so I would book jobs over the phone, and that's what I would do. And finally, Jack, the male owner, said, would you start being my helper? And I said, sure. So I started cleaning carpets. And then he trained me enough. He said, I want you to run your own route. And so the summer after I graduated, the 3 months before I went into the Navy, I was literally running a carpet cleaning truck and doing water restoration jobs. If your water heater burst, your house flooded, we did that kind of work. And it was hard work. And so I did that and went in the Navy, and that was that. Mm-hmm. And then when I was getting out, they sent me a letter and said, we'd be interested in selling the company. And so I'd sent them a letter before I got out and said, well, I don't, had never thought about owning a company. I was going to kind of get a job using my skills I learned in the Navy. But we put letters back and forth a couple of times, and I came home and I went to the banks, excuse me, and, I was 24 years old, about to buy a service franchise with, I think I'd saved up like $12,000 or something, maybe $9,000. And of course, no banks would loan me any money.
Yeah.
It just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I just can't do it. It's not going to happen. So I went and interviewed, and I got a job at Medtronic.
Okay.
And I was going to be inspecting ear tubes.
And that's right up in Memphis.
Yeah, it was in Memphis. And so I was supposed to start on a Monday. And on a Friday evening, the Hardys called me again and said, hey, how much money have you got you could put down? And whatever that number was, 8,000 or 9,000, somewhere in there. I said, this is how much money I've saved up, while I was in the Navy. And it was a lot of money to me at that time. I was a young kid. And they said, if you give us that money, we'll finance it for you. And so I never went to work at Medtronic. So I ended up just calling them, telling them I'm sorry, thanks for the opportunity. But I bought the business, and it had two ragged old vans, a 76 and a 78 Dodge. And one was blue and one was tan, and they had these rainbow stripes on them, and they were terrible looking. And they had 3 trucks running. The other guy used his own truck. And I remember this, and there were 3 trucks running, and the company was grossing $72,000 a year, gross. I was like, well, this doesn't work.
It's a little, even in those days, even in that time, pretty small business.
So I just kind of said, well, the third guy can go. And I jumped on a truck, started working really hard, and kept another guy. And to shorten the story, I had that business from 1990 until, 4 or 5 years into my term as mayor. In 2010, I think, is about when I sold it. But I quit working in it, obviously, when I became mayor. Mm-hmm. And I had turned it over to a manager, and it kind of went down from there. But I turned that from a $72,000 a year business into about a $900,000 a year business before I left it. And it was, and the crazy thing is, we really never ran more than 3 trucks. Mm. So we grew it, and I learned the value of a franchise. There are a lot of people in a franchise business who don't follow the model. Well, if you're not going to follow the model, why are you in a franchise?
Right, that's the whole point.
Yeah, that's the whole point. So it finally dawned on me one day, I need to do what they're telling me to do. Mm-hmm. And I did that, and the business really took off and grew. And we won the Franchisee of the Year for all of North America for our company in 2005, right before I got elected mayor.
So without ever having the knowledge, or not knowledge, but the thought of being a business owner, you just kind of fell into it in a way.
I did fall into it.
And how did that journey work for you as far as, okay, you know the work, you know how to run the trucks and do the actual manual labor, but there's a whole other element of taxes and business development and marketing and all these other aspects that come in with business owning that often you jump first and then you have to learn all these things
That's
second.
Right.
So what was that like for you?
And what you just described is being a technical person who understands how to do a job and being a business owner are 2 totally separate things.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And a lot of people fail in that transition. You can have a really, really great technician who just doesn't ever learn the skills to be a business owner. And I had to learn them, and I made some missteps. I didn't know I was supposed to be paying certain taxes and stuff, and I get a mean letter. I'm like, oh, didn't know that. So let's get busy with that.
Exactly.
But it really was a learning curve, and I had ups and downs. And I remember I fell into that trap that everybody does. I was making money, and I was feeling good, and I got an American Express card. Oops. And I started putting stuff on it, and I woke up one day and I was $8,000 on that card, and I'm like, now I got to pay this off. And I've seen that happen to so many people. You start making money and you think you're a rich business owner. Mm-hmm. You almost never can get to the point you take your focus off your business and quit working. It sinks so quickly. And so, I got over that little glitch and got it paid off, so I'm never doing that again, And the other thing I learned, and I learned this from the franchise company, is that you need to learn to work on your business, not in your business. Mm-hmm. And so one day I just realized that while I was out working, physically working in the business, the other guys might be somewhere I don't even know where they're at. And I couldn't be working and manage them. And so, and then they would call in and say, well, I'm not feeling good today, and I know Chip will go clean those carpets. And I finally got to the point, I just told everybody, I said, I'm not a technician anymore. I'm an owner. Mm-hmm. And if you call in sick, we're going to have to cancel jobs, and that's not going to work for me. And when I sat down at the desk and started managing the business, one bad thing happened. I literally gained 20 pounds in 1 year. Because I'd been a physically active person for all those years. You're telling my story, aren't you? Yeah, man. I literally packed on 20 pounds in 1 year because I suddenly wasn't working anymore. Uh-huh. But my business took off like a shot. Mm-hmm. And it was just because I was there to manage it, and could literally say, well, let's schedule these jobs better. Let's not have him go to Walls and then Collierville. Let's have him go to Walls and then Hernando and then Southaven. And, you kind of organize things and you keep your employees staffed with all the tools they need and make them more efficient and effective. And you can focus more on the things they need so you don't just burn them out. But that's when my business really took off. And the interesting thing that my franchise owners gave me was a 1-week class on cash flow budgeting. Not budgeting, but cash flow budgeting. And there was a really interesting stat they gave us the first week that most businesses, or a huge majority, it was some big number, like 40% of the businesses that go bankrupt are having their most profitable year ever. They grow so fast, the cash can't catch up. So they're just growing and spending money, and yet their receivables aren't catching up quick enough. And you really have to grow a little, level, grow, level. And I got on that trajectory of too fast growth where the cash couldn't catch up. And when you're a small business, banks are reluctant to give you cash flow loans. And if you get one, you might not manage it properly. So I got on too fast of a trajectory for a little bit and realized I was running out of cash. Just like they said, it looks on paper like it, you can understand it on paper, but you think, well, that doesn't really happen. Well, it does.
Cash is king.
Cash is king, yeah.
I learned that too, because if you don't have that cash flow, it can be one mistake or one lost job. You lose one client. Now you can't make payroll. Just like that.
So the one, if we're talking about business, and any advice I could give a business owner is send out your invoices every day. So every day, we collect cash when we're cleaning your carpet at your house. We come home with cash on that or a check. But, you do these apartment buildings or you do a big insurance job. Literally at the end of the day, you're invoicing those today. Because the longer you put that off, the longer they have to forget how wonderful your service was, and they're not as apt to pay. It goes in a bin somewhere. So we literally invoiced within 24 hours of every job we did. And that helped keep our cash where we needed it to be.
I'm taking note of that because I'm dealing with a lot of net 30, net 60.
Yeah, just send that invoice to them the way and let them pay. There wasn't PayPal and Venmo and all that when I was in business, but I was one of the first to start taking credit cards. Carpet cleaning companies just didn't take credit cards way back then. And I said, these are my customers. And then a lot of them wouldn't take American Express because American Express charges a higher fee. And I said, well, the people with American Express are going to pay me more anyway. They're usually the higher dollar amounts.
They're at a different demographic.
Yeah, they'll let you put Scotch Guard on their carpet and upsell them a little. So, you've just got to do those things if you're in business.
So there's a period where you go to college too. It seems like when you tell me the length of time that you owned this business, it's clear that you were going to college throughout too, correct?
Yeah, so
what's your college career look like?
I'm probably the longest term college student in history. So when I got home in 90, I went to Northwest Community College, which was in the building where Southaven City Hall is right now. So they had a campus there, and I took a general business class. I thought, this is going to help me run my business. I just bought a business.
Oh, there you go. So now it kind of gave you direction on what to study.
That's right.
Yes.
So I took general business, that first class, 101, whatever it was, and then I didn't take any more for a while. I just took that one. Then they had this thing at Northwest Community College called ASAP. It was Adult Structured Academic Program or something like that. But you had to be over 21, and the classes were at night. And they were accelerated, where you would go to the same class like 3 nights a week, but you graduate that class in 6 weeks. They just packed it in on you. And so I took those classes for a while, and then suddenly I got elected alderman and thought, I can't do all this, so I just dropped out for a while. And then over the years, I went and took a class here, a class there, and I think I needed one more class to get my associate's degree. And I never did it. I just never got there. And then one year there was a job that came open, and I thought, my goodness, this job is my resume. It's like they took my resume and created a job description. And it was something that I was very interested in doing. And I sent in my resume, and they wouldn't interview me because I didn't have a college degree. And I may,
no matter how qualified
I may
you were.
be, maybe I'm a little high on myself in that, but I felt like I was maybe the most qualified person in the whole country for that job. And I could not get interviewed because I didn't have a degree. And I said, this is never going to happen to me again. And so I literally called the University of Memphis, got assigned a counselor, and said, I want to get a college degree. And let's see what fits best. And so I did most of my classes online. They took into account all of the credits from Northwest. They transferred, and I got my degree at the age of 49 in organizational leadership.
Never too late.
That's right, never too late. And of course, I've never used that degree. I mean, obviously I used the degree. It's organizational leadership. I used the knowledge I gained through it, but it's never helped me get a job. But it sure made me feel better just to get that accomplished.
I was going to say, that self-accomplishment.
Yeah.
That's really important to now. To be a leader too, you need to have confidence in yourself. And if that was what helped you with that, that's your return right there.
Yeah, there are a lot of things we do in life that are, and they should be, most things we do in our life are just to make us feel like we're a better person and can increase our skills and just be better at life.
Yes, and in the middle of that story, you threw out alderman. So now I would like to bridge to, your political career.
Sure.
Without getting on a stump, right?
Right.
But it's a huge part of your story, obviously. And this can lead us to present time now. So, So I know in the midst of, you have so many overlapping things. That's what's great about this. You're owning a business, you're going to college, and then you break into politics. So in that period of leading into being an alderman, how did that, it just seems so out of left field compared to what you were doing. You were in submarines, you're owning a business, and then all of a sudden, hey, an opportunity to be an alderman. What made that turn, and how did that happen?
I moved to Hernando in 1997, and I became close friends with my neighbors pretty immediately. And I don't really know why, but 4 years later, in 2001, there was an alderman election coming up, and it was an open seat. The alderman had decided not to run anymore. And they encouraged me to run, and I thought, well, that's a little weird, but I'm interested in it. I'd never even been to a Board of Aldermen meeting, but, I'd been in the Chamber of Commerce and stuff with my business, and so they encouraged me to run, and I did. I don't know why, really. It just seemed interesting to me.
And you knew the role? You knew what was expected of it?
No, I don't think you ever know till you get in it. So I went to one or two alderman meetings and watched them, and I didn't really grasp it all. So I ran against a local guy who'd been here his whole life, and I'd only been in Hernando for 4 years. And he seemed like a nice person, and I think I won just because I outworked him. He probably knew more people than I did, but I literally knocked on doors every day for a couple months straight. And that was when that wasn't really being done in Hernando, So I call myself accidentally getting elected. So I got elected in 2001, and then I took off learning things. And I think I got my first hard lesson. My friend Scott Fernandez, one of the ones that encouraged me to run, he was on the Planning Commission. And he said, our Planning Commission has passed these design guidelines for what buildings and houses and everything are supposed to look like in Hernando. And the Board of Aldermen never took them up. So they're just sitting there. They're not law. And I said, well, we need those. Hernando might be growing soon, and we need everything to look kind of the way we want it to look. And so I started presenting those in the board meetings on the agenda and saying, we need to pass these. And I don't know if people were against it or what, but I didn't know the process. And they'd say, well, it needs to come back in official ordinance form and this and that. And it took me a year to get it through the Board of Aldermen and get those design guidelines passed. And so that's how I started learning what to do and how to do it. And of course, I think getting those design guidelines passed all those years ago was huge for the city of Hernando because that was right before we boomed.
Yeah.
Everything not everything, but almost everything on the east side of the interstate was built after those design guidelines came in place. That's why our Walmart is all brick. It's why it has white striping in the parking lot. It's why there's a parapet that's tall enough you don't see the air conditioner sitting on the roof. It's why it has low signage. all those buildings were built with our design guidelines, and that's why they look fairly dignified on that side of the interstate. And so those rules are important. People in Hernando want to keep their property values high, so you've got to just control how things are built to make that stay in place. So I'm pretty proud that we got that done, but I learned through that process.
Trial by fire, right?
Yeah, and then and so I was alderman for those 4 years, and Mayor Gale, Ed Gale, was the mayor for 12 years, and he was a wonderful man. He joked a lot, and we just had fun whenever we were around him. And he decided to retire, and then people were encouraging me to run for mayor, and by then I'd kind of gotten the bug. I thought, Hernando is at a point, literally at a tipping point. We can go one way or the other.
Because it was a different looking city.
It was. It really was.
I've learned a little bit through meeting other people through this podcast, and it didn't always look this way, did it?
Well, when I moved into the house on School Street in 1997, my house shares the block, the rectangular block, with apartments. It's just my house and those apartments. And they were rent by the week, and they were terrible. And my house had not been lived in for 2 years. The grass was head high. And the building across the street was literally the burned out hulk of the old high school. I mean, it was just there half burned up. So that's what my neighborhood looked like when I moved into it in the historic district. And there were no historic districts. We had never designated any at that point. So Hernando was at a tipping point. It could go one way or the other. And so I thought it was important. And there were 4 or 5 of us in that race. It was an open seat. You get a lot of people running. And I ran really hard, didn't really know what I was doing. And I think I got 48% of the vote. And I remember going upstairs we had a meeting room up on the 3rd floor on Panola Street, and with all my volunteers, and saying, we didn't make it yet. We got to do this for 3 more weeks. So it was me and the current police chief. The then current police chief was Mike Riley. We were the 2 people running in the runoff. And the funny thing is, I gave that little speech to my supporters, and after it was over, my dad said, "If you don't learn to be a better public speaker, you're never going to get elected." I was like, "Thanks, Dad."
You told me this now?
Yeah. So anyway, I worked on my public speaking later on. But we did win against Mr. Riley, and he was the police chief, and he and I had a couple of talks. And, you get your feelings hurt a whole lot when you're running against somebody in a race. Things are said, and, I've learned that a lot of times it's not really your opponent saying them, it's his supporters, but you feel like it's him saying it or her saying it, and you can get your feelings hurt in a race. You almost always do, and you can build up some resentments. But he and I worked through that, and he stayed on as our police chief. So he and I worked together for quite a few years before he retired. So that was one other thing I learned, is you can't carry grudges forever. Generally, it brings you down more than it brings anybody else down.
I mean, I think it's been since the beginning of time that politics just has that negative side to it, right?
It does.
Because it's you're trying to win over somebody else, and you go and say certain things, right, to position.
Sure.
But it's cool that when it's over and the dust settles, it's like, all right, now we need to work together.
Right.
And that's important, and I'm glad, that was able to be an experience for you. That
Yeah.
the dust settled, everything's cool for the most part.
Yeah, politics can be ugly. People say mean things, they'll just, especially with social media, they'll just get out there and say, he doesn't care about this, or, and I'm thinking, man, you don't know how long at night we stay asleep worrying about this. We may not be doing it exactly the way you want it done, but man, we do care.
Yeah.
And everybody on this board and I care about this city. And we all are going at it different ways. And so we butt heads in the board meetings. But it doesn't mean we don't care. It means we just have different ideas about how to get to the finish line. Or even what the finish line looks like sometimes. But generally, we're all just doing our best to do what's good for the city and the citizens. And that's the rewarding part. If you can get through all the negativity and you see something get done that the citizens wanted done, that's when you feel like you've really accomplished something.
That's awesome. So you just got married.
I sure did.
So this is exciting. What was Tell anyone that might not know.
Well, we left out part of the story. In 2017, I got beat and lost my race for mayor.
Okay, let's go there.
And so I lost the race, and I went into a private job, and I was working for a mental health company. Learned a whole lot of stuff there, opened my eyes to what mental health is all about.
Another complete left turn for you.
Yeah, a complete left turn. It was a psychologist running a business, and he wanted some business people in there to help him, so I was one of the 2 business people he hired, and I learned so much about mental health. And I have to say this, we as a people, if you're having heart trouble, we're all going to be pulling for you and saying, man, we hope he gets over that heart trouble. But if you have depression or a traumatic brain injury, some people are going to say, oh man, just tough through it. You're good to go.
It's invisible too.
Yeah, yes. But your brain is an organ just like your heart. Mm-hmm. And if your heart gets sick, we understand that. If your brain gets sick, for some reason, we don't understand it. And it's a medical issue. You can't tough through it. Mental health, I don't even know why we call it mental health. It should just be health. It's just a brain part of it. Mm-hmm. It's not your lungs, it's not your heart, it's just your brain. But I learned that it's really something that people don't understand.
And there's a stigma.
And there shouldn't be.
Which is odd. Look, I'm an open book. As people learn who I am and my story, I've struggled with all those things, and I'm a big proponent of mental health.
Yeah.
And therapy and trying to work against that stigma. My thought has always been, because it's in a way invisible. That's right. You can get a CAT scan, MRI, you can do all these tests, blood work. You have this. We have proof of that. It's in writing. Yes. Yep. But when it comes to the brain, it's how do you feel from a scale from 1 to 10.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like the foundation. I could be wrong, and maybe there's some modern science that can get you more detail than that. But from my experience, you're just talking to another person and trying to explain what you're going through. And then they have to take that and be like, okay, well, this sounds like maybe bipolar, some manic depression, you have high anxiety. Mm-hmm. But it's still a guessing game. Over time with therapy, you learn more and more.
Right.
And
we just don't know as much about the brain as we know about the other organs. We just don't.
If there was a way to just plug something into the brain and get a reading, yes, you're 60% depressed. Right? And you can't do that.
Yeah, you really can't. So I'm always trying to share that knowledge I gain with people all the time. It's real. Don't ever look at somebody and say, just tough your way through it. You can't.
No.
You've got medication can help, counseling can help. There are lots of things that can help it, but you can't tough your way through a brain disease or brain injury. It just doesn't work. So, but I digress. We were talking about me getting married.
Yeah. So what bridge to that though? Because then you get reelected, obviously, and then is this around the time?
But the marriage happened while I was out of office. Not the marriage, but meeting my wife.
Yeah.
And I met her after I was out of office for a few months. And I was struggling trying to find my way. I was doing some consulting and relaxing a lot and catching up, and trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I met her. I realized I had met her before when the Board of Realtors put this committee around me to see who they were going to endorse to run for mayor. Mm-hmm. She was on that committee. And I remembered her from that. And, and they actually had endorsed me for mayor. And so she's a realtor, obviously, and she was the president of the Board of Realtors in North Mississippi, and she was Realtor of the Year, so she's very involved in that. But looking back, when I met her and we started dating and everything, she told me quite a while later, she said, I would have never gone out with you if you were mayor. I just wouldn't have. That's not who I am. So that 4 years out, I learned about mental health, and I got a wife.
What's
it worked
her name,
out
if you
great.
don't mind sharing?
Oh, Christy Savage.
Okay.
So, and we've dated for the last 4 years, basically, and been together, and it was time for us to really solidify the relationship. It's been solid for a long time, but somehow marriage is just the next step to really make you, and it does make you feel different. It does. And so we got married on March 19th. Yes. So we haven't been married for very long, and life is wonderful, and we just, and you notice that nowhere in my history did I say I'd ever had kids, because I didn't. I never had kids. And now I've got 6 grandkids. So what a transition that is.
What's the age spectrum?
Man, they're from 12 down to a month.
Whoa.
Yeah.
All right. So you're getting a good dose now.
Oh, yeah.
And
It's great.
I don't know what it's like to be a grandfather yet. I'm looking forward to it because, you get to have the fun, and then you hand them back off.
There you go. Right.
So you're getting the sweet spot right out of the gate.
That's right. So we're really enjoying the grandkids. Like I said, we just have one that's less than a month old.
That's outstanding.
And so 2 of them live right here in Hernando, and 4 of them live in Brandon. So they're 2.5 hours away.
So your wife said, I would have never dated you.
That's right. She would have never
if
dated
you were mayor, and then she marries the mayor.
That's right. And she actually was a huge part of me getting reelected.
Okay, so what year was that?
That was just last year.
2021?
Yeah, I think it was April when we had the election, and I took office in July. Mm-hmm. But, I had told people for years, hey, I'm done. I had no idea how relieved I would be to be out of office. It was there was a lot of stress, and I didn't realize it until it was gone. I was like, wow, this is what life is like.
You did it from 2005 to 2017.
That's
correct?
right.
So that's a long time.
And so I literally, and I was not lying or being coy. I told people, I'm not going to run again. Y'all can count me out. And then I said it for years, and Christy and I were very happy in our life, and then people literally started coming at me saying, we really want you to run. We really, really want you to run. And I just kept saying, no, I'm done. I'm happy in the job I'm in. I'm helping people, I think. And, that's what I liked about being the mayor was I felt like I could help people, but in the mental health field, I felt like I could help people as well. And one day, Christy and I don't know who brought up the conversation, but we just started talking about, well, should we consider it? It seems like there's a groundswell out there of people asking us, even though we keep saying no. Mm-hmm. And so we said, well, let's really gauge the interest. And so we changed it from people would ask me to run, I would say, I would have to have a lot of help. Because in 2017, I think some of my supporters just thought I would win. And, I didn't raise any money. I didn't have anybody knocking on doors with me. I was just out there all alone, literally trying to win an election. And I didn't work very hard, quite frankly. So I started asking for help, and people were saying, yeah, we're going to help you. We're going to fund your campaign. We're going to get volunteers. And we kept hearing that over and over. And finally, one day, we just looked at each other and talked about it. And she said, if we're going to do it, we're not going to lose. I'm not going to be part of losing. That's the way she is. It's just hilarious. But she is a great, great person. And she's a hard worker and a driver. And so she taught me lots of things about being tenacious in a campaign. And Christy doesn't normally wake up early. That's not her thing. I'm the early guy. But I would wake up. We did 6 months of full-blown campaign. I would wake up, and she'd be sitting in the bed over there on her phone. I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you awake at 5? She said, I've got these ideas, and I'm trying to make a post for us, and I need you to look at it and put your spin on it. And, she did this every day. Mm-hmm. Every single day we had to have something new out there on social media. It's what you do when you're running a campaign, and it was tiresome. Sometimes I would snap at her and say, I'm just tired, just let it go for a day. She's like, we can't. We're not going to lose.
We're not losing.
We're not losing. We're not losing. And, she really, really helped run that campaign. She ran the campaign. She was the campaign manager. Mm-hmm. I was the candidate. And so I did the things a candidate was supposed to do. It's really interesting, especially when it's your fiance, which we weren't even fiance then, but, we knew we were going to be married. And every once in a while, though, you get a manager who can manage your campaign. That's kind of critical in today's environment. But every once in a while, there's got to be a point where the candidate just says, nah, that's not really me. I'm not going down that road. That might get a vote, but that's just not who I am. And it's always important for the candidate to do that because you have to put your personal stamp on it. If not, the campaign managers make every candidate look exactly alike. Mm-hmm. And we're not all alike. Right. And we shouldn't even pretend to be. And so, and the one thing, though, we both did is we said we're not going to run a negative campaign. People do not like that. Nobody wants to hear negative. So we just put positive stuff out there and facts. And, there were a couple of facts that we were running on, the things we wanted to fix, but it wasn't negative. It's just like, we think this could be better. Mm-hmm. This hasn't been done, and we think it should be done. If you think it should be done, vote for me. But we really tried to keep a very positive campaign. And it's hard because, some of your supporters will get on Facebook fighting with your opponent's supporters. And then everybody's thinking, oh, he's being mean, but I'm thinking, I wish they would stop. And sometimes I had to call and say, please stop that.
They kind of speak for you in a way,
without
you designating them.
And some of them you don't even know. You know, there are people supporting you don't know. So it's a complicated thing, and it was a big relief when we won. We took a breath for a little while and then got busy with the transition and trying to figure out what we were going to do to get into office and meeting the newly elected aldermen. There were some of them we barely knew. And we've grown over, we've been in office about 10 months now. We've grown into a pretty good team.
Now, through that whole time, did you ever expect to be on a podcast like this?
I don't think I did.
See, this is what it all built up to.
That's right.
It led to us meeting. This is amazing.
Yeah. No. So you'll have to interview Christy next time. She's way more interesting than I am.
Absolutely.
But, to end that segment, and it's not an end, but Christy and I are super happy. I did promise her, and I'm doing my very best. I think I fail occasionally to keep a good life-work balance and make sure the grandkids and she and I came first. So I'm trying to do that. We do, as you can imagine, there's some Saturdays, especially in the spring, I'll have 4 events on Saturday. So you have to kind of just integrate it into your life, and go at it like this is a fun event. We've got to be at the farmer's market, but you know what? The farmer's market's fun. Yeah. We've got to be at the 5K race, but it's fun. These people are excited. Your family. Yeah, right. And you can take the grandkids with you sometimes, and so we're making it fun. And also, I'm just trying not to stay here past 4:30 or 5. I get here at 7 or 7:30, and I do all those things on the weekend and many nights during the week. We just had a 3-week period a week ago, the 3 weeks prior to that, where very literally we had something every night. And it was stressing me, and I'm sure that stress rolled over to Christy. I know it did. And so we're trying to not do as much at night, but it's sometimes you just have to. There's some events you just can't say no to.
But then you balance it out, because burnout does no one anything.
That's right.
No good to anybody.
You got to balance it out. So the week after that 3-week crazy period, I said, Christy, can we just kind of make a pact? We're not even going out to supper this week. Let's just be together at home on the couch in the evenings, and that helped, kind of got us back where we need to be. But the spring is a busy time anyway. Everybody's got an event somewhere. So you just have to integrate your life with your work, and not feel guilty if you take off half a day on Friday because you're going to work all day Saturday. Your brain needs it. And what I'm finding out is that I am much more effective if I don't work a 70-hour week. You just can't do that.
I think everyone is.
Yeah.
Some people don't figure it out.
We live in a society and I grew up this way, the harder you work, the better man you are. Put in all those hours, and, I'm thinking we have it backwards. We don't have to work 60, 70 hours to have done our part. We need to do things that are strategic and important and focus on those. Because a lot of times, if you're just working that many hours, a lot of it, you're just spinning your wheels doing stuff you may not even need to be doing.
Yeah.
You need to step back, prioritize, be fresh. If you can come to work fresh, you can get more done in 3 hours than you could 8 hours if you're not fresh.
Make sure that the meeting means something.
You're exactly right.
Rather than just booking meetings, because I've fallen into this too. You're booking calls. You're busy, so you feel like you're building, you feel like you're doing the right thing, but there's zero return on some of these meetings that really amounted to nothing.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, I'm doing less of those now.
And I still fall into it. Christy will say, well, do you really have to do all those things today? Why do you have 7 meetings today? Are they all that important?
Right. And
I'll look at a couple of them and say, I probably should have said no to this one. But it just kind of happens. You'll have nothing on your calendar. You'll say, well, I'll talk to that person on that day for 40 minutes, even though doesn't seem like something I should be in the middle of. But then you have the really important one stack up around it, and that one really drags you down because you don't get a break in between. So you do have to be selective, but also, which makes it even harder, I really like to be the open door mayor. I want a citizen to feel like they can walk in that door and talk to their mayor. And so that's what I do. My phone number is literally on my Facebook page. So people look on Facebook and call me or text me. If it's something that doesn't have to be done right now, I wish they wouldn't text me on Sunday evening at 6 o'clock, but they do anyway. Some of those I'm like, why do they want to ruin my Sunday when it could have waited till Monday? It's not like their water main just busted. But I am accessible more than most. Literally, you can look out this window here people can see through these blinds and see that I'm in the office. I don't hide from people. So if they come in, my assistant will say, yeah, he's not in a meeting, come on in. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So sometimes that drags you off course, but you never can. I've told myself I can't forget who I work for in the end. Mm-hmm. It's not these developers and builders who are trying to take all our time. It's the citizens. And what they have bothering them may seem little, but it's their thing and it's big to them. Mm-hmm. And I've always tried to think, how would I feel if that was in my yard or if that was my issue? So we're trying to do a lot better handling those small things that seem small, but they aren't small to the people who they affect.
Right.
So, it's a balance for sure. And there's a lot of work to do in Hernando. We're all understaffed. Nobody can find help. But we do the best we can without burning out.
Well, this open door policy you have, there's no better example than what we're doing right here. You've been generous between our pre-interview. That was an hour long. You've given me a couple hours today. I very much appreciate that time you've given me and given us, the podcast, my team, and then hopefully, the audience that is engaging with this and learning more about their mayor and on a personal level. So,
and I think it's important.
Thank you for taking the time for this.
And I think this is important, the work you're doing. I think if we, we didn't talk about politics here today.
Right.
We didn't talk about things going on in the city.
We talked about music mostly when we hung out for coffee.
That's right.
Talk a lot about music.
I don't know. I think what you're doing is important. You're letting people get to know other people as people.
Yes.
Not as their job. So often we just know people as their job. We don't get to know the person. And
right.
So maybe today people have a little glimpse into where I came from, and there's a lot of things you just can't find out unless you're around people or have candid conversations like that. And
when placed under the umbrella of business, people buy people. That's always been my theory. It's 101, really. It's not my theory. I shouldn't take credit for that. It's in probably 1,000 books that they explain that to you. But that was my angle on this, as a way to promote the local businesses, community figures by story and person and the human nature of people. So I think we did a good job with that today. I'm sure we missed and skipped over a lot of stuff. Maybe we'll have to do a part 2 next year. Who knows?
That's what we'll do.
Or the day you're on the other side of being a mayor and just interested in being husband and grandfather, we can circle back and
that'll be a fun time in life too.
So let me do this quick little outro here, and then we'll wrap this up. So for you that are watching and listening to this, the best way you can support this podcast is by sharing these episodes. And in doing so, sharing this episode will help get Mayor Chip Johnson's story out there in hopes to, embrace that community even better. So all you have to do is go to our website, therealhernando.com. You can enter one of our episode pages, grab the link, and throw it on your socials. Email it to a friend. That's the best way to support this whole entire movement. You can also find our podcast on all the major platforms: YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher. We're on Audible. We're going to be on Amazon. How about that, right? And also you can consume this in 3 different ways. On our website, you can watch this episode, you can listen to it, and you can read it. We transcribe the whole episode. It's usually like 14 pages of transcript. But
probably be 15 pages because I talk a lot.
My transcriptionist, has a field day, with this, but she gets paid by the word, so she's good. And our socials, Facebook and Instagram @TheRealHernando for both. So please, by all means, share this with as many people as you can. It would help all of us here. So again, Mayor Johnson, thank you so much.
Thank you, Derek. Enjoyed it.